The courtroom erupted in gasps as Officer Reed crashed to the floor, blood streaming from his nose. Cameras flashed wildly as Alexandra Daniels stood over him, her military stance unwavering. 12 years as a Navy SEAL had taught her one thing: never start a fight, but always finish one. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Now let me take you back to how this moment of silent justice began, and show you what happens when the wrong person is pushed too far. Alexandra Daniels never planned to make history. Growing up in South Chicago with her younger sister Monique, she simply wanted to serve her country with honor. At 38, Alex had become a legend in military circles as one of the first black women to complete the brutally demanding Navy SEAL training program. Her 15-year career included 7 combat deployments, 3 Purple Hearts, and a Silver Star for exceptional valor during a hostage rescue operation in Somalia where she had saved 19 civilians while nursing a bullet wound in her shoulder. The citation had described her as showing extraordinary courage under extreme duress, but Alex never talked about that day. Like most of her missions, the details remained classified. When she finally retired from active duty, the transition to civilian life hit harder than she had expected. The structured military environment had provided clear objectives and defined enemies. Back home in Chicago, threats were more subtle but no less dangerous. Alex established a security consulting firm specializing in corporate protection, applying her tactical expertise to helping businesses safeguard their personnel and assets. Her company quickly gained a reputation for excellence, particularly in crisis response training. Yet beneath her professional success, Alex struggled with the invisible wounds of war. The nightmares came most nights. Vivid flashbacks to firefights and explosions that left her gasping for breath in her darkened bedroom. During the day, sudden noises could trigger momentary disorientation. She managed these symptoms with therapy, meditation, and rigorous physical training, but PTSD remained a constant companion. The one true anchor in her civilian life was family. Especially her relationship with her sister Monique and 17-year-old nephew Marcus. After their parents died in a car accident 5 years earlier, Alex had become even more involved in their lives, seeing them nearly every weekend. Marcus represented everything Alex had fought to protect during her military service. Smart and compassionate, he maintained straight A's while volunteering at a community center teaching computer skills to younger kids. He dreamed of attending MIT for computer engineering, with applications already submitted for the following fall. Their world shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when Alex received a frantic call from Monique. Marcus had been arrested while walking home from the community center, accused of robbing a convenience store 3 blocks away. The officer claimed Marcus matched the description of a 6-foot black male in a dark hoodie. Never mind that the security cameras at the center could prove Marcus had been teaching a coding class at the exact time of the robbery. Never mind that dozens of witnesses could confirm his presence. The system had already labeled him, processed him, and was preparing to judge him. Walking into the 18th District Courthouse for Marcus's preliminary hearing, Alex immediately noticed the atmosphere of subtle segregation. White defendants received respectful nods from Officer James Reed, a 42-year-old veteran cop with short-cropped gray hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to harden whenever they landed on black faces. Black defendants received clipped commands and suspicious glares. The air felt charged with unspoken tension. District Attorney Sarah Campbell stood reviewing files near the judge's bench. At 35, Campbell had built a reputation as tough but fair, though Alex noticed how she seemed to defer to police testimony regardless of contradicting evidence. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Campbell gave a small professional nod before turning away. Alex watched Officer Reed closely as he processed defendants. He reminded her of certain military officers she had encountered, the kind who confused authority with superiority. The type who believed the uniform made them untouchable. She had learned to recognize the subtle tells of prejudice during her years in service. The way Reed's shoulders relaxed when speaking to white citizens but tensed when addressing black ones. The fraction of additional space he maintained when standing near people of color. The slightly louder, slower speech pattern he used, as if assuming comprehension issues. These were the sophisticated microaggressions that had evolved to replace more overt forms of racism, yet the intent remained transparent to those experiencing them. Finding a seat beside Monique, Alex squeezed her sister's trembling hand. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "I promise." As Marcus was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his lanky frame, Alex felt a surge of protective rage. Before she could speak with him, Officer Reed's voice carried across the room as he spoke to another officer. "These people always claiming innocence," he said. Just loud enough to be heard. Like we don't know better. Alex's military training had taught her to identify threats early. In that moment, watching Reed's dismissive gaze sweep over her nephew, she recognized the most dangerous kind. The preliminary hearing began with Judge William Russo calling the court to order. Officer Reed took the stand, back straight and expression serious, as he recounted the events leading to Marcus's arrest. At approximately 4:30 p.m., I responded to a robbery report at Marvin's Convenience on Oakley Avenue. Reed testified, his voice carrying a practiced authority. The victim described the perpetrator as a tall black male, approximately 6 feet, wearing dark clothing including a black hoodie. While patrolling the area, I observed the defendant matching this description walking rapidly away from the scene. Alex listened intently, mentally flagging each inconsistency. The robbery had occurred at 4:15 according to the police report, not 4:30. Marcus stood 5 feet 10 inches, not 6 feet. And most significantly, the community center where Marcus taught was in the opposite direction from where Reed claimed to have spotted him. As Reed continued elaborating on the supposed evidence, Alex quickly jotted notes and passed them to Marcus's public defender, Jessica Winters. The young attorney appeared overwhelmed. Dark circles under her eyes suggesting she was carrying far too many cases. She glanced at Alex's notes with visible relief, clearly grateful for the assistance. Alex's mind flashed back to the countless times she had sat Marcus down for the talk that black parents across America delivered to their children. How to keep his hands visible during any police encounter. The importance of respectful compliance even in the face of disrespect. Never running, even when innocent. Never raising his voice. The burden of proving harmlessness that no white child had to bear. "Yes, sir, no, sir, I understand, sir," she had made him practice, hating the necessity but prioritizing his survival. On the witness stand, Reed's partner, Officer Michael Torres, shifted uncomfortably during cross-examination. Unlike Reed, Torres seemed conflicted, his testimony more measured. His eyes occasionally meeting Alex's with what appeared to be apologetic awareness. When Jessica questioned discrepancies in the timeline, a 60-year-old white man with thinning blonde hair, Reed maintained respectful eye contact and spoke clearly. When looking toward Marcus or other black attendees, his gaze hardened, his chin lifting slightly as if literally looking down on them. The subtle shift spoke volumes about his worldview. During a brief recess, Monique broke down in tears. "They're making him into some kind of criminal," she whispered. "My baby has never been in trouble a day in his life." Alex embraced her sister, feeling her tremble with fear and rage. "We have evidence," she assured Monique. "We just need to make them see it." Spotting District Attorney Campbell stepping into the hallway, Alex made a quick decision. "Wait here," she told Monique, then crossed the corridor with purposeful strides. "Ms. Campbell," Alex called, keeping her voice professional. "Alexandra Daniels. Could I have a moment of your time?" The DA looked momentarily surprised but nodded. "Ms. Daniels. What can I help you with?" Alex produced her phone, showing timestamp photos of Marcus teaching his coding class during the time of the robbery. "My nephew is innocent," she stated firmly. These photos prove he was at the West Side Community Center when the robbery occurred. There are 23 witnesses who can confirm his presence, including the center director and 2 social workers. Campbell studied the photos, her professional mask slipping to reveal momentary doubt. "This should have been submitted to your nephew's attorney for proper discovery," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "I recognize this puts you in a difficult position," Alex acknowledged. "But I also recognize political pressure when I see it. Someone wants a quick conviction rather than the right one." Campbell's eyes flashed with brief anger before she regained her composure. "I have an obligation to prosecute based on the evidence presented by law enforcement," she said carefully. "But I also have an ethical duty to justice. I'll review these materials." As Campbell walked away, Alex felt eyes on her. Turning, she found Officer Reed watching their exchange, his expression cold and calculating. He approached slowly, positioning himself to use his height advantage as intimidation. "Interfering with police business is never a good idea," he said, voice low enough that only Alex could hear. "Military background or not, you should know your place in my courtroom." Alex held his gaze without flinching. "Last I checked, Officer Reed, this was the people's courtroom. And justice applies to everyone, regardless of color." Reed's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a slender black woman in her mid-40s approached with a stack of files. "Officer Reed, Judge Russo needs the Harrison transcripts," she said, smoothly interrupting the tense exchange. Reed gave Alex one last warning look before turning away. The woman, who wore a court reporter badge identifying her as Vivian Johnson, gave Alex a subtle nod. "First time in our courthouse?" she asked conversationally, but something in her eyes suggested deeper meaning. "Yes," Alex replied, "though I'm starting to get a clear picture of how things work here." Johnson's expression remained neutral, but she handed Alex a business card. "If you need any official transcripts for your nephew's case," she said, emphasis subtle but unmistakable. As Alex pocketed the card, her phone vibrated with an incoming text. Opening it, she found a message from the community center director with an attachment. Security camera footage showing Marcus teaching his class during the exact time of the robbery. Evidence that could change everything, if the court would allow it to be seen. The security footage played on Alex's phone with crystal clarity, showing Marcus enthusiastically explaining coding concepts to a group of children at precisely 4:17 p.m. 2 minutes after the convenience store robbery occurred 3 blocks away. "This is irrefutable evidence," Jessica Winters whispered as they huddled in a quiet corner of the courthouse hallway. The young public defender's eyes widened with hope for perhaps the first time since the hearing began. "The timestamp is clearly visible. And we can call the center director to authenticate the footage. He can't possibly be in 2 places at once." Alex nodded, feeling a brief surge of optimism. "How quickly can you get this admitted into evidence?" Jessica's face fell slightly. "Judge Russo tends to be strict about last-minute evidence, especially anything that contradicts police testimony. But this is exactly the kind of exculpatory evidence that should create reasonable doubt. I'll file the motion immediately." As Jessica hurried away to prepare the necessary paperwork, Alex's mind drifted to her own experiences with racial profiling. Even in her Navy uniform, she had been stopped and questioned in ways her white colleagues never experienced. After earning one of the military's most elite designations, she still found herself followed in department stores and viewed with suspicion in upscale neighborhoods. The difference was that now she had the confidence and training to handle such situations. Her nephew had neither her experience nor her status to protect him. A discreet cough interrupted her thoughts. Officer Torres stood nearby, glancing around nervously before approaching. "Miss Daniels," he said quietly, "I want you to know that not all officers are like Reed." He hesitated, lowering his voice further. "This isn't the first time he's targeted black kids based on flimsy descriptions. Some of us have tried reporting it, but nothing ever sticks." Before Alex could respond, Torres walked away quickly as Reed appeared at the end of the hallway. When court resumed, Judge William Parker took his seat on the bench. Unlike Russo, Parker had a reputation for fairness. Though Alex noticed how deferential he seemed toward law enforcement testimony. His gray eyes scanned the courtroom with practiced neutrality as he called the proceedings to order. Jessica rose confidently. Your Honor, the defense wishes to present new evidence that conclusively establishes the defendant's whereabouts during the time of the alleged crime. Reed immediately stood, his face flushing with anger. Objection. This is the first the prosecution has heard of this alleged evidence. Proper discovery procedures haven't been followed. Jessica held her ground. Your Honor, this security footage was just obtained from the West Side Community Center. It clearly shows Marcus Daniels teaching a class at the exact time of the robbery, making it physically impossible for him to have committed the crime. This is ridiculous, Reed interjected, his voice rising. They've had plenty of time to doctor footage. These people are trying to manipulate the court. The phrase, these people, hung in the air, its implication unmistakable. Judge Parker frowned. Officer Reed, please control your outbursts. Counsel will refer to the defendant and his family with appropriate respect. Reed's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. The argument continued, with Jessica insisting on the footage's relevance while Reed grew increasingly agitated. Other officers in the courtroom exchanged uncomfortable glances as Reed's objections became more vehement and less professional. The community center has probably been covering for him all along, Reed insisted. These kids from that neighborhood all protect each other. Alex watched Judge Parker's expression, noting how he seemed torn between procedural adherence and the clear impropriety of Reed's comments. After several minutes of heated debate, the judge sighed heavily. While I'm concerned about the late introduction of this evidence, I'll allow it to be viewed, with the understanding that its authenticity will need to be verified. Reed's face darkened with barely controlled rage. As the footage played on the courtroom's monitor, showing Marcus clearly engaged in teaching, District Attorney Campbell's expression shifted subtly. She leaned over to her assistant, whispering something that made the younger woman nod and begin taking notes. When the video concluded, Campbell stood. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, the prosecution requests time to review and authenticate the footage before proceeding. Judge Parker nodded. Granted. We'll recess until tomorrow morning. As people began filing out, court reporter Johnson caught Alex's eye, subtly tilting her head toward a manila folder on her desk. Meanwhile, Reed approached Marcus, ostensibly to escort him back to holding. As he passed, Alex saw Reed's hand move in a threatening gesture, just outside the judge's line of sight. Do you believe Officer Reed should be immediately removed from duty for his behavior, or should there be an investigation first? Comment number 1 if you think he should be removed immediately. Or number 2 if you think there should be a full investigation before any action is taken. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe in accountability for those who abuse their authority. How far will Officer Reed go to maintain his false narrative, and what evidence might court reporter Johnson be trying to share? Let's continue with this story of justice delayed but not denied. The courthouse hallway bustled with activity during the extended recess, providing court reporter Vivian Johnson the perfect cover to approach Alex discreetly. Ms. Daniels, she murmured, pressing a thick folder against Alex's arm. You might find these transcripts educational. Cases involving Officer Reed over the past 3 years. Alex accepted the folder with a questioning look. Johnson's eyes darted around before she leaned closer. I've watched him testify in 37 cases involving young black defendants. The pattern is impossible to ignore once you see it. Before Alex could thank her, Johnson melted back into the crowd, her professional mask firmly back in place. Finding a quiet corner, Alex flipped through the transcripts. Her military training and pattern recognition immediately identifying the similarities. Reed consistently used identical language describing furtive movements and suspicious behavior when testifying against black defendants. His probable cause always stemmed from vague descriptions that could match countless individuals. Most disturbing were the number of cases where contradictory evidence had been deemed inadmissible on technicalities. Officer Torres approached as Alex was reviewing the documents, his expression guarded but determined. "Several officers have concerns about Reed," he confided after ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. "His arrest reports targeting black suspects are 3 times higher than any other officer in the district. When confronted, he makes subtle threats about backup being delayed for officers who don't maintain solidarity." Alex studied Torres carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" Torres glanced toward where Reed stood talking with Bailiff Wilson. "I became a cop to protect people, not terrorize them. My younger brother would be about your nephew's age. But he was killed in a case of mistaken identity by police in another district. The officer who shot him was never held accountable. The revelation hung between them. A shared understanding of justice denied." Before their conversation could continue, a commotion drew their attention. Another young black defendant was being escorted through the hallway, Reed roughly gripping his arm despite the man offering no resistance. The unnecessary force triggered something in Alex. A flash of memory catapulting her back to a village in Afghanistan where she had intervened when a local militia member was roughing up civilians. The familiar tightness in her chest. The tunnel vision, the heightened awareness of every movement around her. Alex breathed deeply, using the grounding techniques her therapist had taught her. 5 things she could see. The marble floor, Reed's hand gripping too tightly, Torres's concerned expression, the American flag on the wall, sunlight through high windows. 4 things she could touch. The transcript folder in her hands, her wool blazer, her watch, her sister's hand suddenly grasping hers. 3 things she could hear, murmured conversations. The squeak of dress shoes on polished floors, her own heartbeat steadying. Monique's arrival pulled Alex fully back to the present. "Are you okay?" her sister asked, recognizing the signs of Alex's PTSD episodes. Alex nodded, redirecting their conversation to action. "I need to make some calls," she told Monique. "Former colleagues who might help us understand what we're dealing with." Stepping outside the courthouse, Alex contacted 3 former military connections now working in law enforcement. Within an hour, she received a disturbing picture of Officer James Reed. 12 excessive force complaints, all against black citizens, all dismissed. 2 shootings ruled justified despite questionable circumstances. Multiple informal reports of racial slurs used during arrests when body cameras were conveniently malfunctioning. A reputation for targeting black youth in particular. Back inside, Alex found Monique confronting Reed near the water fountain. "My son was teaching children when that robbery happened," she insisted, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You knew that, or you should have if you'd done proper investigation before arresting him." Reed towered over her, his contempt barely concealed. "Your son fits the description of a suspect in a violent crime. Maybe you should be asking yourself why he chooses to look like a criminal." The deliberately provocative statement made Monique gasp. "How dare you?" Alex intervened, stepping between them. "Officer Reed, that comment was unprofessional and inappropriate. My sister deserves the same respect you'd show any parent concerned about their child." Reed's eyes narrowed. "Family of troublemakers, I see." As they returned to the courtroom, Reed deliberately bumped into Marcus while escorting him to his seat, causing the teenager to stumble. The action appeared accidental to most observers, but Alex recognized the calculated nature of the contact. Throughout the resumed proceedings, she noticed Reed's hand drifting toward his weapon whenever he stood near black attendees. A subtle intimidation tactic that most people wouldn't consciously register. Judge Parker seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the tension in his courtroom. "I expect professional decorum from everyone present," he announced, though his gaze lingered more on the defense side than on Reed. Court Bailiff Robert Wilson, a heavy-set white man in his mid-50s, stood near the judge's bench with an air of casual authority. Alex observed the familiar nods between Wilson and Reed. The kind of silent communication that spoke of long association. When Reed needed access to restricted areas of the courthouse, Wilson conveniently looked the other way. The security footage proving Marcus's alibi was presented again, this time with testimony from the community center director confirming its authenticity. The timestamp showed conclusively that Marcus had been teaching his coding class 3 blocks away when the robbery occurred. Even with this evidence, Reed persisted in questioning its validity. Video can be altered, he insisted. Timestamps can be manipulated. We see criminal enterprises doing this all the time. Judge Parker appeared to be weighing the evidence fairly until a short recess, during which Alex noticed him engaged in a private conversation with Bailiff Wilson. When court resumed, something had changed in the judge's demeanor. His expression had hardened, his earlier openness replaced with a new rigidity that sent a chill down Alex's spine. Years of military operations had taught her to recognize when a situation was about to deteriorate. Every instinct now told her they were heading into dangerous territory, and she needed to prepare accordingly. Judge Parker's ruling landed like a thunderclap in the hushed courtroom. Regarding the defense's motion to admit the security footage as exculpatory evidence, the court finds that proper chain of custody procedures were not followed. Furthermore, the late introduction of this evidence violates proper discovery protocols. The motion is therefore denied. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Jessica Winters shot to her feet. Your Honor, with all due respect, this footage conclusively proves my client could not have committed the crime. To exclude it would be a miscarriage of justice. Parker's expression remained impassive. My ruling stands, Counselor. The defendant will remain in custody until trial, which is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Alex felt her sister crumble beside her, Monique's body shaking with silent sobs. Marcus sat motionless, his young face frozen in disbelief as the full weight of the justice system's failure crashed down upon him. Meanwhile, Reed stood near the prosecution table, a barely perceptible smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The victory confirmed what Alex had already suspected. Someone had influenced the judge during that private conversation with Bailiff Wilson. Her military training kicked in automatically, her mind shifting to tactical assessment mode. Know your enemy. Understand the battlefield. Identify potential allies. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message from one of her law enforcement contacts. The text was brief but explosive. Reed has had 12 excessive force complaints in 5 years, all against black citizens, all dismissed. Internal investigation was started twice, dropped both times after pressure from above. Be careful. Alex wasted no time. During the commotion following the ruling, she approached District Attorney Campbell, whose expression suggested she was as surprised by the judge's decision as anyone. A word, please, Alex requested firmly, guiding Campbell to a quiet corner. 12 excessive force complaints, Alex stated without preamble, showing Campbell the documentation. All against black citizens. All buried. And now an innocent teenager is being railroaded because Officer Reed can't admit he arrested the wrong person. Campbell's professional composure wavered. Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're public records technically, though someone went to great lengths to make them difficult to access. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Campbell glanced toward Reed, then back to Alex. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The police union, the commissioner's office, the mayor's re-election campaign. They all want conviction rates, not complications. And I want my nephew's future back, Alex countered. The future Reed stole based on nothing but racial profiling. Before Campbell could respond, court reporter Johnson approached with additional documents. Ms. Campbell, I believe these court transcripts are relevant to your current case, she said formally, though her meaningful glance at Alex spoke volumes. They document Officer Reed's testimony in similar cases where evidence was later found to have been misrepresented. Campbell accepted the transcripts with visible reluctance. I'll review these, she said, though Alex couldn't tell if she was simply maintaining appearances. Throughout this exchange, Reed had been watching from across the room, his expression darkening as he observed the three women in conversation. He approached with deliberate steps, his authority radiating from every movement. Ms. Campbell, if you're done entertaining conspiracy theories, we have actual criminals to process. The dismissive tone made Campbell straighten. Officer Reed, I'll determine which case matters require my attention. Reed's gaze shifted to Alex, contempt evident in his cold blue eyes. You military types always think your service puts you above the law. But in my courtroom, you're just another civilian who needs to know her place. The familiar phrase, know your place, ignited memories of every racist encounter Alex had experienced, from childhood through her decorated military career. Still, she maintained her composure, remembering her promise to Marcus about always taking the high road. Interesting choice of words. Officer Reed, she replied evenly. Though I believe this is the people's courtroom, not yours. And justice should be colorblind. Reed's face flushed with anger just as Monique approached. Her eyes red from crying but her spine straight with maternal determination. My son is innocent, she stated, voice carrying enough to draw attention from nearby observers. That security footage proves it. How can you continue this charade? Reed turned to Monique, his stance subtly intimidating. Ma'am, I suggest you calm down before you create a disturbance. I am calm, Monique replied. I'm also a taxpayer and citizen asking legitimate questions about why my son was arrested without evidence. Reed's response was to step closer, using his height and bulk as intimidation. When Monique stood her ground, his arm, accidentally, swung out, knocking her off balance. She stumbled backward, nearly falling before Alex caught her. Watch yourself, officer, Alex warned, the professional calm of her voice belied by the steel in her eyes. That looked intentional from where I'm standing. Reed leaned closer, voice low enough that only Alex could hear. Typical behavior from you people, always playing the victim. Maybe if you raised your men better, they wouldn't all end up in the system. The racial slur was delivered with just enough deniability that Reed could claim misinterpretation if reported, but Alex recognized the calculated bigotry for what it was. Still, she maintained her military bearing, refusing to give him the reaction he clearly wanted. Step back, Officer Reed, she stated professionally. You're violating standard proximity protocols, and I'm requesting you maintain appropriate distance. Reed seemed taken aback by her controlled response, perhaps expecting an emotional outburst he could use against her. His momentary confusion quickly morphed into greater aggression. Emboldened by Judge Parker's ruling in his favor, Reed positioned himself directly between Alex and Marcus, physically blocking her view of her nephew. Court proceedings are concluded, he announced loudly. All visitors need to exit the courtroom immediately. As Alex attempted to move toward her sister, Reed deliberately stepped backward, pushing into her personal space and forcing her to step back to avoid contact. The move was expertly executed. Subtle enough to appear accidental to most observers, but unmistakably deliberate to someone with Alex's training. The tension in the courtroom became palpable as people began to notice the confrontation building. Officer Torres took a step forward, clearly concerned by Reed's escalating behavior. Reed, maybe we should give them a moment, he suggested. Reed shot him a warning look. Stay in your lane, Torres. I've got this under control. Torres hesitated, torn between professional solidarity and obvious discomfort with Reed's tactics. The courtroom had grown unusually quiet, observers sensing the building confrontation. Reed turned back to Alex, his hand now resting casually on his holstered weapon, an unmistakable gesture of intimidation as he stood inches from her face. Last chance to leave quietly, he said, voice dripping with authority and something darker. Or we can discuss interference with court procedures in a more official capacity. The breaking point came without warning. As Alex reached past Reed toward her distraught sister, his hand shot out, gripping her arm with unnecessary force. "You're not listening," he snarled. "Court is adjourned. You need to leave now." His fingers dug painfully into her bicep, the deliberate application of pressure targeting nerve points in a way that spoke of specific training in pain compliance techniques. "Officer Reed," Alex stated calmly, her military bearing unwavering despite the assault. "You are currently restricting my movement without cause. Please remove your hand from my arm." Reed's grip tightened further, his face inches from hers. "I determine what constitutes cause in my courthouse. Your continued presence is interfering with official procedures." Alex felt the familiar combat awareness flooding her system, time seeming to slow as her training assessed the situation. She had survived firefights in 7 countries, extraction operations under heavy enemy fire, and close-quarters combat with insurgents. This courthouse confrontation was triggering the same neurological responses. But she fought to maintain control. "This is your final professional courtesy," she said evenly. "Remove your hand, or I will consider this an unlawful assault and respond accordingly." Reed's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Big bad Navy SEAL," he taunted, voice low but clearly audible to those nearby. "You special forces types aren't so special in the real world. Out here, you follow civilian authority like everyone else." The deliberate disrespect of her service ignited a flare of anger that Alex quickly contained. She had faced far worse provocations during her BED/S training, where instructors had used every psychological tactic to break candidates' composure. "Officer Reed," she repeated, her voice steady. "Remove your hand from my person immediately." Instead of complying, Reed suddenly shoved her backward against the wooden court barrier, using his body to block the view of Judge Parker, who had finally noticed the disturbance. "Know your place," Reed hissed, the words carrying the weight of centuries of similar commands issued to Black Americans who dared stand their ground. The courtroom fell completely silent, the collective intake of breath audible as observers processed the unmistakable assault happening before them. Judge Parker rose from his bench. "Officer Reed." "What's happening there?" Reed half turned, maintaining his grip on Alex. "Just escorting an uncooperative visitor out, Your Honor. Everything's under control." Bailiff Wilson stepped forward. "Judge, perhaps you should let Reed handle this situation. Court proceedings are concluded." Parker hesitated, clearly uncomfortable but deferring to Wilson's suggestion. Reed turned back to Alex, using the judge's hesitation as permission to continue. He leaned closer, voice pitched for her ears alone. "See how this works? No one's going to help you. Even with your fancy military background, you still need to learn your place." The deliberate emphasis on those last 3 words confirmed what Alex already knew. This was about race, not procedure. In her final attempt at de-escalation, Alex spoke clearly enough for others to hear. "I have the right to defend myself against unlawful assault, Officer Reed. This is your last warning." Reed's response was a contemptuous laugh. "Threatening an officer now? Let's add that charge to the list." In a sudden movement, he grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back in a pain compliance hold as he reached for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for interfering with court procedures and threatening an officer." The aggressive move shifted Alex's weight forward unexpectedly, and Reed used the momentum to justify additional force. His fist connected with her cheekbone, a strike he would later claim was necessary to subdue resistance. The blow would have incapacitated most civilians. For Alexandra Daniels, 12-year veteran of the Navy SEALs with extensive close-quarters combat training, it triggered an automatic response honed through thousands of hours of practice and real-world implementation. In the split second between Reed's strike and her response, Alex made her decision. She could submit and face false charges, potentially leaving Marcus without an advocate. Or she could defend herself using the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat without causing serious injury. Her training made the choice clear. Using Reed's own momentum and grip against him, Alex executed a precise defensive counter, breaking his hold and redirecting his energy. The technique required minimal strength but perfect timing, using physics rather than force to neutralize an attacker. Reed, unprepared for trained resistance, lost his balance completely. His forward momentum carried him past Alex as she stepped aside, his own weight and miscalculation sending him crashing face first to the floor. Blood immediately began streaming from his nose where it had connected with the hard courthouse tiles. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Alex immediately stepped back into a non-threatening stance, hands visible, making no further aggressive movements. The courtroom remained frozen in collective shock as Reed rolled over, reaching instinctively for his weapon with rage distorting his features. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority and face immediate consequences? Comment number 1 if you believe Alexandra was justified in defending herself. Or number 2 if you think she should have submitted to the unlawful arrest. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves equal protection under the law regardless of their race. Subscribe to see more stories where justice eventually prevails despite the odds. What do you think will happen next? Will the other officers support Reed's version of events? Or will someone finally stand up to his pattern of abuse? Let's see how this tense standoff resolves. Officer Torres moved with surprising speed, placing himself between Reed and Alex before the situation could escalate further. Another officer, a young woman Alex hadn't noticed before, stepped forward to secure Reed's weapon. Stand down. Jim, Torres commanded firmly. Everyone stand down right now. Judge Parker's gavel crashed down repeatedly. Order! I will have order in this court immediately. The gallery erupted in chaotic voices, phones recording the unprecedented scene from every angle. Court reporter Johnson's voice cut through the chaos with professional clarity. For the record, Your Honor, I have the entire incident documented in the official court transcript, including Officer Reed's threatening language and physical assault on Ms. Daniels prior to her defensive response. Reed struggled to his feet, blood staining the front of his uniform shirt. She assaulted a police officer, he shouted, pointing at Alex who remained perfectly still, her military bearing evident in her controlled breathing and neutral stance. Arrest her now. Before any officer could move, a voice from the gallery called out, I got it all on video. Several spectators held up phones, having captured the entire exchange from multiple angles. District Attorney Campbell stepped forward, her earlier hesitation replaced with decisive professionalism. Your Honor, given the circumstances, I believe we need to carefully review what just occurred before any further action is taken. Ms. Daniels appears to have acted in self-defense after Officer Reed initiated physical contact. Bailiff Wilson moved toward Alex. Regardless of circumstances, assault on an officer requires immediate detention. His hand reached for his cuffs, but Judge Parker intervened. Bailiff Wilson, Officers Reed and Torres, counsel for both sides. In my chambers immediately. He pointed to Alex. Ms. Daniels, you will remain here under court supervision until we return. As the group filed toward the judge's chambers, Alex finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. The confrontation had triggered memories of her most intense combat situations, and the familiar post-adrenaline tremors began in her hands. She concealed them by clasping her fingers together, maintaining her outward composure. Monique rushed to her side, eyes wide with fear. Alex, what have you done? They're going to arrest you now, too. The genuine terror in her sister's voice reflected generations of justified distrust in the justice system. For Black Americans, even clear self-defense could be twisted into criminality when facing law enforcement. It's going to be okay, Alex assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence. There are too many witnesses. Too much evidence. Other Black families in the courtroom gradually approached, forming a protective circle around the sisters. We saw what happened, an elderly woman said firmly. That officer has been bullying people in this courthouse for years. My grandson got 10 years because of his lies. Others joined in, sharing similar stories of encounters with Reed. Excessive force during arrests. Evidence that mysteriously disappeared. Testimony that contradicted body camera footage but was accepted without question. A pattern emerged of systematic targeting that had gone unchallenged until this moment. In the judge's chambers, Officer Torres provided his account of the incident. Your Honor, I need to be clear about what I witnessed. Officer Reed initiated physical contact with Ms. Daniels without provocation. His use of force was excessive given the circumstances, and she responded with a controlled defensive technique that caused minimal injury. Reed's face contorted with rage. You're taking her side? After everything I've done for you? Torres stood his ground. I'm telling the truth, Jim. This has gone too far. The racial comments, the excessive force, the false testimony. I can't keep looking the other way. Court reporter Johnson had brought her records, spreading transcript pages across the judge's desk. Your Honor. These are excerpts from 23 cases where Officer Reed's testimony included similar language about black defendants. In 12 of these cases, subsequent evidence contradicted his sworn statements, yet no perjury charges were ever filed. Judge Parker's face grew increasingly grave as he reviewed the documents. Why wasn't I made aware of this pattern before now? Johnson's expression remained professional, but her eyes reflected years of frustrated silence. Attempts to flag these inconsistencies were consistently dismissed, Your Honor. Court reporters document what is said, but we have no authority to challenge testimony. Outside in the courtroom, Alex received a text message from Torres. Warren is coming. Stay calm. Within minutes, Captain Diana Warren strode into the courtroom, her authoritative presence drawing all eyes. At 50, Warren had risen through the ranks despite the dual barriers of being both female and black in a department dominated by white men. Her reputation for uncompromising integrity had earned her respect even from those who resented her authority. Warren surveyed the scene with experienced eyes, quickly assessing the situation before approaching Alex. Ms. Daniels, I'm Captain Diana Warren. I understand there's been an incident involving one of my officers. Her tone was neutral but not accusatory, a professional collecting facts rather than assigning blame. Before Alex could respond, phones throughout the courtroom buzzed with notifications. The videos of Reed's assault and Alex's defensive response had already begun circulating online, triggering immediate public reaction. Warren's own phone chimed, and she glanced at the screen, her expression tightening as she watched the footage. Meanwhile, in the judge's chambers, D.A. Campbell revealed her own ethical dilemma. Your Honor, I've received multiple complaints about Officer Reed's conduct over the past 2 years. Each time, pressure from above led to the complaints being buried. The department can't afford another brutality scandal, was the explanation. Judge Parker's expression darkened further. So instead of addressing the problem officer, the department concealed his misconduct, allowing it to continue and escalate. Back in the courtroom, Warren spoke quietly with several witnesses, reviewing the video footage from multiple angles. She then approached Bailiff Wilson, who had returned from the judge's chambers looking distinctly uncomfortable. Wilson, I understand you and Reed have worked together for some time, she stated, her tone making it clear this wasn't a casual observation. Wilson shifted his weight, avoiding direct eye contact. We've known each other professionally for about 15 years, yes. And during that time, have you witnessed previous incidents involving excessive force or inappropriate comments toward black defendants or visitors? Wilson hesitated, clearly weighing his response. Warren's unwavering gaze finally broke through his resistance. There have been situations, he admitted reluctantly. Jim can be old school in his approach, but nothing that warranted formal reports. Warren's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried unmistakable authority. I'll need a complete statement from you, Bailiff Wilson. Omissions at this point will be considered obstruction. As Wilson processed the implicit warning, Officer Torres approached Warren and officially filed a misconduct report against Reed. documenting not only the current incident but previous concerning behavior he had witnessed. The courthouse had become divided, with some officers maintaining solidarity with Reed while others, particularly younger officers and officers of color, seemed relieved that the long simmering issues were finally being addressed. Outside the courthouse, news vans had begun to arrive, drawn by the viral videos now spreading across social media platforms. The story was rapidly gaining traction. Decorated Navy SEAL defends herself against racist cop in courthouse assault. Captain Warren, recognizing the potential for the situation to escalate further, made a decision that would later be described as both brave and necessary. After reviewing all available evidence and taking statements from multiple witnesses, she formally placed Officer Reed under investigation and temporary suspension, pending both internal review and potential criminal charges for assault and civil rights violations. For the first time that day, Alex allowed herself to acknowledge the weight of what had happened. She had never intended to become the center of a confrontation that might now ripple throughout the justice system. Her only goal had been protecting her nephew from a false charge. Yet as she watched Warren methodically constructing an accountability process that had been absent for far too long, she recognized that sometimes justice required someone to stand firm against overwhelming pressure. Sometimes silence served only to perpetuate injustice. And sometimes a single moment of resistance could create space for long overdue change. 1 week passed like a blur of depositions, interviews, and legal consultations. Alex sat beside Monique in the same courtroom where everything had changed, but the atmosphere felt fundamentally different. Judge Parker had ordered a special hearing to address both Marcus's case and the confrontation with Officer Reed. The gallery was packed with community members, journalists, and legal observers. Captain Warren sat with several senior officers from Internal Affairs, their expressions grave as they reviewed documents. Reed was notably absent, having been placed on administrative leave pending multiple investigations. Judge Parker called the court to order, his demeanor markedly different from the previous hearing. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that serious questions have been raised about the handling of this case and others. This court is committed to addressing these concerns thoroughly and transparently. He turned toward Marcus. Mr. Daniels, regarding the robbery charge against you, I have reviewed the security footage from the community center as well as statements from 23 witnesses confirming your presence teaching a coding class at the time of the incident. I am dismissing all charges against you with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. Furthermore, I am ordering your record expunged of this arrest. Marcus sat stunned as Monique burst into tears of relief. Alex squeezed her nephew's shoulder, her own emotions carefully controlled but visible in her eyes. District Attorney Campbell stood. Your Honor, the District Attorney's Office wishes to formally apologize to Mr. Daniels for his wrongful arrest and detention. Our preliminary review indicates this case should never have proceeded beyond initial investigation. Furthermore, we are now conducting a comprehensive review of all cases involving Officer Reed's testimony. Campbell paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. Additionally, we have uncovered disturbing evidence suggesting Officer Reed may have systematically falsified evidence against numerous defendants, particularly young black men. We have identified at least 17 cases requiring immediate review, with potentially dozens more to follow. This announcement sent murmurs rippling through the courtroom. Judge Parker allowed the reaction before continuing. Now to the matter of the physical altercation between Officer Reed and Ms. Alexandra Daniels. Captain Warren, please update the court on your findings. Warren approached the bench with precise military bearing that mirrored Alex's own posture. Your Honor, Internal Affairs has conducted an extensive investigation, including interviews with 32 witnesses and review of video evidence from multiple angles. Our findings conclusively establish that Officer Reed initiated unprovoked physical contact with Ms. Daniels, used excessive force without justification, and made racially discriminatory statements both immediately before and during the altercation. She placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. This report documents 12 previous excessive force complaints against Officer Reed, all involving black citizens, all administratively dismissed despite substantial supporting evidence. We have also identified a pattern of racial profiling in his arrest record that cannot be explained by any legitimate policing strategy. Parker reviewed the documents with increasing concern evident on his face. And what actions is the department taking in response to these findings? Warren stood straight, her voice carrying throughout the courtroom. Officer Reed has been suspended without pay pending termination proceedings. We are also referring our findings to the District Attorney's Office for consideration of criminal charges including assault, civil rights violations, and multiple instances of perjury in previous testimony. Torres stepped forward next, visibly nervous but determined. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to address the broader issues that allowed this situation to develop. At Parker's nod, Torres continued. What happened here wasn't just about one officer. It was about a culture of silence that protected misconduct as long as it was directed at certain communities. Several officers, myself included, witnessed concerning behavior from Officer Reed but feared retaliation if we reported it. That fear wasn't imaginary. He described how officers who spoke against misconduct often found themselves without backup in dangerous situations, passed over for promotions, or assigned to undesirable shifts. This isn't just about removing one bad officer. It's about changing a system that made it safer to remain silent than to speak truth. His testimony clearly affected the other officers present, several nodding in reluctant agreement. Court reporter Johnson presented her contribution next, methodically outlining years of transcripts showing Reed's pattern of behavior. The record shows Officer Reed consistently used different language and demeanor when describing or addressing white defendants versus black defendants. Terms like these people and them appear 137 times in his testimony referring to black citizens. Language that creates an implicit separation between those deserving protection and those deserving suspicion. D.A. Campbell, seemingly transformed by the events of the past week, made a public commitment. My office will review every case involving Officer Reed's testimony, prioritizing those where defendants are currently incarcerated. Where we find evidence was falsified or testimony was perjured, we will move to vacate those convictions immediately. She paused, making direct eye contact with Alex. We will also implement new protocols requiring body camera verification of all officer testimony and establishing an independent review process for excessive force complaints. The most surprising testimony came from Bailiff Wilson, who approached the stand with the demeanor of a man carrying a heavy burden. I've worked alongside Jim Reed for 15 years. He began hesitantly. I witnessed behavior that should have raised red flags, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to question a fellow officer. There were times he referred to black defendants with language I won't repeat in this courtroom. Times he bragged about teaching lessons during arrests. I looked the other way because it was easier than standing up to someone I worked with every day. His voice broke slightly. I was wrong. My silence made me complicit. As the testimony continued, Captain Warren announced immediate policy changes for the department, mandatory body cameras that couldn't be deactivated during civilian interactions, implicit bias training conducted by external experts, and a new civilian oversight board with actual disciplinary authority. The changes represented a fundamental shift in accountability that many had fought for over decades. Throughout the proceedings, Alex remained composed but watchful, her military training evident in her alert assessment of the room. When finally asked to address the court regarding potential charges for her role in the altercation, she stood with quiet dignity. Your Honor, I defended myself using the minimum force necessary to neutralize an immediate threat. I regret that the situation escalated to that point. But I cannot regret protecting myself from unlawful assault. Throughout my military career, I swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath didn't end when I left active service. Her words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity and truth. Judge Parker nodded thoughtfully. Ms. Daniels? Based on the overwhelming evidence, this court finds your actions constituted legitimate self-defense against unlawful assault. No charges will be filed against you. The ruling sent a wave of relief through Alex's body, though her expression remained composed. The threat of legal consequences had hung over her throughout the investigation. The familiar specter of a justice system that too often criminalized black self-defense. Parker wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court wishes to extend its sincere apology for the treatment you and your family received. The justice system failed you, failed your nephew, and has failed countless others in similar circumstances. That acknowledgement is small comfort, but it is necessary for any meaningful change to begin. As the formal proceedings concluded, Captain Warren approached Alex privately. The department will be implementing significant changes in the coming months, she said. We need community input to make sure those changes are meaningful, not just cosmetic. Your military background and personal experience would make you a valuable advisor to our reform committee. If you'd be willing to serve. The invitation represented something Alex hadn't expected, the possibility of transforming a painful confrontation into structural improvement. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with notifications. The video of the courtroom incident had gone viral nationally, sparking renewed conversations about racial profiling, police accountability, and the uneven application of justice. Multiple community organizations were requesting her participation in discussions about systemic reform. What had begun as one family's fight against injustice was expanding into something with potential for much broader impact. Through it all, Alex's focus remained on Marcus, whose quiet resilience throughout the ordeal revealed a strength of character that filled her with pride. As they prepared to leave the courthouse, Torres approached one final time. What you did took courage, he said simply. It's making others find their courage too. Alex nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Sometimes a single stand against injustice could inspire others to take their own stands. Sometimes transformation began not with grand policy announcements, but with one person refusing to accept what should not be accepted. The road ahead would not be easy. Institutional inertia, political pressures, and entrenched resistance would push back against meaningful change. But for the first time in generations, the possibility of actual accountability had entered the courthouse. And Alexandra Daniels, who had faced danger in combat zones across the world, found herself ready for perhaps her most important mission yet. Ensuring that the system that had failed her nephew would not fail the next young black man who found himself targeted by those sworn to protect and serve. 3 months after the courthouse confrontation, Alexandra Daniels stood before a packed community center auditorium. The same community center where Marcus had been teaching when he was wrongfully arrested. Justice isn't just about what happens in courtrooms, she told the diverse audience of residents, police officers, and city officials. It's about the thousands of daily interactions where dignity is either honored or denied. It's about whether we truly believe in equal protection under the law. Not just as words on paper but as lived reality. The Justice Reform Initiative that had grown from the incident now held regular town halls bringing together community members and law enforcement for difficult but necessary conversations. Captain Warren sat in the front row, alongside several officers including Torres, who had since been promoted to a training position focused on de-escalation techniques. Marcus, now preparing for his freshman year at MIT with a full scholarship, operated the audiovisual equipment with characteristic focus. The changes sparked by that single moment of resistance had exceeded anyone's expectations. Judge Parker had initiated a comprehensive review of all cases involving defendants who claimed mistreatment or evidence tampering by Officer Reed. 17 convictions had already been vacated, with dozens more under review. The individuals released from wrongful incarceration included fathers separated from children, students whose educations had been derailed, and workers who had lost careers. The human cost of one officer's misconduct had proven staggering. District Attorney Campbell had established an independent integrity unit staffed by attorneys with civil rights backgrounds, given authority to investigate allegations of prosecutorial or police misconduct without political interference. Court reporter Johnson now led a team documenting patterns in courtroom language and treatment, creating data that could identify problematic behavior before it escalated to the level Reed had reached. Perhaps most significantly, the police department had implemented policy changes that officers actually supported: better training, more accountability for problem officers who made everyone's job harder, and improved relationships with the communities they served. Reed himself faced multiple felony charges for assault, evidence tampering, and perjury. His case had revealed connections to several other officers with similar patterns of misconduct, leading to a broader housecleaning within the department. Bailiff Wilson had taken early retirement, but not before providing testimony that implicated several judges in dismissing legitimate complaints against officers. The system's protective mechanisms had begun to shift from shielding misconduct to addressing it before it destroyed lives. For Alex, the most meaningful outcome wasn't institutional but personal. The community program she had created, Know Your Rights, Know Your Worth, taught young people about constitutional protections, proper police interaction, and de-escalation techniques. The classes, taught by both civil rights attorneys and reform-minded officers, provided practical tools while building relationships across traditional divides. My military service taught me that real strength isn't about domination, Alex explained to a group of teenagers during one session. It's about protection. About standing firm when necessary but also knowing when restraint is the more powerful choice. Those lessons apply whether you're in combat or a traffic stop. Marcus had found his own path forward through the trauma, deciding to study law after completing his engineering degree. I want to build systems and policies that protect people, he had explained to Alex. Technology and law both need ethical frameworks to ensure they serve rather than oppress. As Alex concluded her presentation, a young officer raised her hand. How do we rebuild trust when there's so much historical pain? The question hung in the air, its honesty creating a moment of genuine connection. One interaction at a time, Alex answered. Trust isn't built through grand announcements or policy papers. It's built through daily choices to see each other's humanity. Through officers intervening when they witness misconduct instead of looking away. Through communities acknowledging good policing while continuing to demand accountability for bad policing. Through the uncomfortable recognition that systems built on historical inequality require intentional redesign, not just surface adjustments. After the formal session ended, Alex received word that 3 more of Reed's victims had been exonerated that morning. Men who had lost years of their lives to false testimony and manufactured evidence. No compensation could restore that lost time, but at least their names had been cleared and their freedom restored. The fight for systemic justice would continue long after the viral video of her courtroom stand had faded from public memory. Progress would come in incremental steps rather than dramatic confrontations. But as Alex watched Marcus explaining computer coding to a group of officers' children, she recognized that something fundamental had shifted. The silence that had protected injustice for generations had been broken. The reflexive deference to authority regardless of conduct had been questioned. The assumption that some lives mattered less than others had been challenged. Not through violence or vengeance, but through one woman standing firm in her right to dignity and equal protection. As they walked out of the community center together, Alex and Marcus passed a group of new police cadets in training. The young officers, representing diverse backgrounds and perspectives, nodded respectfully to both of them. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. It was a silent acknowledgement that change was possible, that systems could improve, and that justice, while imperfect and ongoing, could move forward when people of courage refused to accept what should not be accepted. For Alexandra Daniels, former Navy SEAL and reluctant catalyst for change, that quiet moment of mutual respect represented the most meaningful victory of all. What moments in your own life have you witnessed someone stand up against injustice? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you believe in equal justice under law for all Americans regardless of race, give this video a like. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage in the face of discrimination. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's brave stand can create ripples of change throughout an entire system. Thank you for joining us for this powerful story of silent justice, and remember, true strength isn't about domination, but about protection and standing firm for what's right. Alexandra Daniels' confrontation with Officer Reed teaches us powerful truths about justice and courage. When systems fail to protect everyone equally, individual stands become necessary. Alex didn't seek conflict but refused to accept injustice when directly confronted with it. Her military discipline allowed her to respond proportionally rather than emotionally, demonstrating that effective resistance requires control, not just passion. The story reveals how institutional prejudice persists through silence and complicity. Reed's behavior continued because those who witnessed it, from fellow officers to court officials, chose career safety over moral responsibility. Real change began only when Torres, Johnson, and eventually Wilson broke this code of silence. We learn that accountability isn't automatic but requires evidence, witnesses, and persistent advocacy. Without the multiple recordings, court transcripts, and Alex's determination, Reed's version of events might have prevailed despite being false. Perhaps most importantly, this story shows that transformation is possible. The department's eventual reforms weren't merely reactions to public pressure but represented genuine recommitment to constitutional principles. When enough people within a system recognize its failures and commit to improvement, structural change becomes possible. True justice isn't about revenge but restoration, restoring dignity to the wrongfully accused, restoring integrity to compromised institutions, and restoring trust between communities and those sworn to protect them. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered if one person could really make a difference? Alexandra's story proves that standing firm against injustice can create ripples of change throughout an entire system. What moments in your own life have you seen someone courageously confront discrimination? Or when have you wished someone would have stepped up? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you believe our justice system should work equally for everyone regardless of race, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding the strength to overcome them. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads of true stories that need to be told. Share this video with someone who might be losing faith that things can change. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can give each other is hope. Thank you for being part of our community of truth seekers. Remember, justice isn't just about courtrooms and legal procedures, it's about how we treat each other every single day.